See, the question you need to ask yourself right now, if you feel like God is not speaking or showing up the way that you want, it could be not that he's not speaking. It could be that you haven't taken the time to listen. And how often in our lives that we find ourselves in places that we do not want to be, and we ask, God, why haven't you met me here? And God's like, because I'm over there. What are you doing right here? Because you got to take the time to make sure that in every season of your life that you bring the presence of God with you. Because if you invite him into the moments that terrify you and scare you, the moments where you feel like you're standing on the edge of a raging river, the promise of his presence isn't that there will be no challenges. The promise of his presence is that he will give you the strength that you need. He'll give you the peace that you long for. He says, then you'll know which way to go, since you've never been this way before. It's this alignment that has to happen in your life, where you tell God that you're never going to go to a place that you're not willing to bring him into. Because sometimes it's not that important to know where you're going. It's more important to know who you're following. And in verse 5, it said, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. And tell the priest who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. See, this is such a fascinating moment in the lives of these priests, because they were called to serve. They were the leaders of the tribe. They were the ones that were the symbol and the marker of the intimacy that comes with God. And when you choose to follow him, no turning back. And the story of Israel was a story of an exodus, as we talked about. It's them out of oppression, out of slavery, into the wilderness. And there was a time that this entire people were wandering because they believed the promise that God had for them, but they kept questioning how God would do it. And God allowed them to wander for 40 years because he knew even if you step into this land that's promised you, if you don't have the character to enjoy it, it'll be a waste. And he allowed the people of Israel to wander for 40 years because he said, I got to get you ready. Got to get the stuff out of you that you're holding on to. They'll be wandering and they would say, Moses, what are you doing? We want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back to being slaves because at least we had food. Because sometimes the promise of even a worse life is more safe than the promise of an expectant life. And they were wandering and wandering. And then finally, God raises up Joshua and he says, I'm going to use you to bring your people to the promised land. And then they come to a very familiar scenario. You see, they come to the edge of the waters and they had heard the stories about what God did with their parents and with their grandparents, about how when they were leaving Egypt, right? You know this story. Maybe you read it in the Bible or you watched Prince of Egypt as a kid. Remember, right? Cartoon Moses. He comes to the Red Sea and he raises his staff. And when he raises his staff, the waters parts. The Red Sea parts, and then all of Israel gets to step into a new future. So imagine when the priest got to the edge of the Jordan and it says that the water was raging. It says there's rapids, the force of nature. And I imagine they thought, Joshua, here's what you do. Raise the staff. Call on God to move. Ask God to meet us here. part the waters, remove the obstacle. And I imagine that's what they were expecting, and God said no. Because that was the faith for them, not for you. He said, I'm not going to do for them. I'm not going to do for you what I did for them, because that was their faith. That was their moment. He said, no, this time, instead of me moving first, you need to move first. And he forced them to get to the edge of their fear, to get to the edge of their doubt, to get to the edge of their uncertainty, to their despair, to having this moment where they had to decide, are we going to go back to what we know, or are we going to be moved to what is yet to be created? And he forced them to stand on the edge and say, you got to get in the river. Man, if I was one of those priests where it says they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, I imagine there was four corners, I would have been like, hey, bro, you first. Nah, you first. You're older. You got this? God told me it's you. Because what it would require of them was an understanding that this could cost them their life. And I think God was pressing them to the point. He's pressing you and I. Let's go, am I worth it even if it is risking your life? Is your future worth your life? If your life is rooted in the past, you better believe it is. And he forces them to get to the edge of the river. See, what's the river in your life? That every road that you seem to take it, you end up winding here still in front of the Jordan River.